And what all Americans do is they say they're going to Europe, as if it's just one place, with just one lived experience across the whole of Europe. So in their minds, Europe is this sort of homogenous place that's like going backwards in time to where their ancestors were from, and that it's some sort of historical theme park. Not really how that worked.
Okay, here's something that Europeans don't seem to understand because it is fairly cheap to travel between countries in Europe. Rarely when Americans say they're going to Europe, do they mean they're only visiting one country, because it can cost thousands of dollars just to fly to the first country, not to mention paying for hotels, food, travel from city to city and country to country. Most working class Americans will never travel abroad because they cannot afford it. And those who can often pack as many locations into a trip as is feasible, because it's most likely going to be the only opportunity they have to be on that continent. You also have to think about who you are to the person who's telling you they're going to Europe. If I'm talking about my trip with my friend, there's a good chance that I'm going to tell them every single location I'm going to. But if I'm, for example, waiting at the library for my passport paperwork to be done, and someone asks me where I'm going, I'm not going to say I'm going to Italy and France and Spain and Wales and England. It's just easier to say Europe to this perfect stranger. And by the way you speak about Americans, I think you're probably a perfect stranger to everyone who says they're going to Europe. And God knows if we try to shorten the list by just telling you, oh, I'm going to France, and then someone like you sees that I posted a picture of myself in Pisa, the comments will be, oh my God, Americans are so stupid. They think Pisa is in France. Like, I get that most Americans are annoying as hell, but we also can't win no matter what we do. But let's look at it from the perspective of you going on a trip in America. If during your trip in the US, you're planning to go to 15 states, and someone asks where you're going, you list all 15 states every single time? Or do you just say, I'm going to America? Because if it's the latter, you're breaking your own rule. One of the things you complained about is this.
As if it's just one place, with just one lived experience across the whole of Europe.
But we could say the same if you're planning to visit Minnesota, Texas, and New York on your trip, but just calling it America. Because while yes, the people living in all three states all have the same president, every state has its own culture, its own vocabulary, and its own laws. In some states, I don't have the right to my own body. That's quite a different experience than living in a state where you do have a right to your own body. So it's just as inaccurate to say that Americans all have the same lived experience. Also, it's funny that you use the phrase lived experience because I used that phrase in the comments of a video that I made about enjoying going to uni in England. And I was told by dozens of Brits that the phrase lived experience is a meaningless American phrase, even when I showed them that there are scholarly papers written with that phrase in it. You also brought up that Americans think Europe, oh no, I used an overarching location again, is basically just where our ancestors lived, and that Americans believe that, like, Ireland hasn't changed in any way since our great-great-great-great-grandfather left Donegal or whatever. And of course, I can only speak from my own experience, but I don't find that to be the case. In fact, I often feel kind of dumb about how high a regard I hold other countries in, because I think all developed nations, aside from America, are so progressive that they don't deal with the same day-to-day problems that we do. Like, one of my mutuals was making videos about racism that she experienced in Canada, and I found myself thinking, wow, I thought racism was only an American thing. And like, intellectually, I know that racism is not only an American thing, but because I see other countries as so much more advanced than America, I thought that they might be over that by now. Now, I'll never say that there aren't Americans who think that America is the shit and the only good place to live in the world. I run into people like that every day on this app. But again, to say in your video that we all have the exact same experience as Americans, but that's just not true, is it? Not really how that worked.